A wall of brown water rolls across a Colorado field in September 2013. Downstream, half a world away, that same rising water is exactly what a fragrant little herb has waited its whole life for. One flood, two fates. This is not the biography of a person. It's the biography of a relationship between water and a family of plants that can't agree on what a flood even means. To one, it's an ending. To the other, it's a beginning. Meet the rice paddy herb, Limnophila aromatica. In Vietnam, they call it ngo om. In Cambodia, ma om. It grows wild across Southeast Asia, and it doesn't just tolerate flooding, it needs it. Hot, wet, submerged rice fields are its favorite address. Farmers wade past it every season without a thought. But cooks know it. Sliced into canh chua, Vietnamese sour soup, or simmered into Cambodian ma om soup, it tastes faintly of lemon and cumin. Thousands of miles north, at high altitude, a very different flooded world exists, one with a legal name. Ecologists call it a wet herb field. It's not a poetic phrase, it's written into conservation law. New Zealand's Department of Conservation defines herb field vegetation by exact numbers: 20 to 100% of the ground covered by herbs, not trees, not shrubs. In New South Wales, the same category carries the force of law. Wet herb fields sit apart from their drier cousins, tall and short alpine herb fields, by one detail: drainage. Where those drain freely, wet herb fields hold water. Saturated soil, poor runoff, the same high elevation. A flood that never fully leaves. Now bring the story down to sea level, onto a real American farm. Boulder County, Colorado. The Fresh Herb Company. Organic culinary herbs, hanging baskets, greenhouse flowers, run for years by the Anderson family. It was ordinary, thriving, unremarkable. Exactly the kind of baseline every disaster story needs before the water arrives. No one there was thinking about floods. They were thinking about basil and thyme and the next delivery. That's the setup. Two water-dependent worlds, one wild, one cultivated, both waiting, unknowingly, for the same force. What happens next will destroy one field entirely and simply confirm what the other field already knew. This is the shape of the story we're about to follow. Baseline, flood, contamination, recovery, legacy. A life cycle, like any biography, except the subject isn't a person. It's a field, and the water that made and unmade it. And running underneath all of it, a paradox that never quite resolves. Floodwater is simultaneously an executioner and a creator. It can end a farm season in an hour, and it can be the only reason a wild herb exists at all. Before we get to the mud, the mold, and the 60-day waiting rule that decides whether a farm survives, we need to understand how a herb that thrives underwater ended up 8,000 miles from home, rooted in American soil. 10,000 years of cultivation shaped this plant for one purpose: standing in water. Limnophila aromatica, the rice paddy herb, is native to Southeast Asia, where it flourishes in heat and thrives submerged, rooted in flooded rice fields from Vietnam to Cambodia. In Vietnam, it's called ngo om. In Cambodia, ma om. Cooks drop it into sour soups, into fish stews, into anything that needs a sharp citrus note. For generations, this herb never left the paddy. It didn't need to. Then the war came, and when the war ended in 1975, it did not end the way maps suggest. It scattered. Millions fled Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, crossing oceans with almost nothing they could carry. You cannot pack a flooded field into a suitcase, but you can pack memory. And somewhere in the wave of resettlement through the 1970s, cuttings and seeds of this water-loving herb crossed the Pacific with them. By the late 1970s, Vietnamese communities were resettling across California, Texas, and beyond. Exact dates blur, no customs form recorded a herb cutting, but the plant took root here the same way the people did, quietly, deliberately, out of necessity. This is the part of the story seed catalogs never tell. Rice paddy herb didn't arrive through agricultural trade or botanical exchange. It arrived in pockets, in luggage linings, in the muscle memory of people who knew exactly how to grow it. To grow it right, you need what the paddies had: standing water, warm soil, saturated roots. Immigrant farmers rebuilt tiny wetlands in backyard plots and community gardens across the diaspora. Miniature paddies, thousands of miles from any rice field. Today, you'll find ngo om bundled fresh in Vietnamese markets, from San Jose to Houston to Toronto, a fixture in canh chua, sour soup, as essential to the dish as fish sauce or tamarind. It's a plant whose entire biology is a metaphor nobody asked for. Displaced people carrying a species that only makes sense half submerged, replanting a small flooded piece of home in a country that had never seen it before. But here is the paradox the rest of this story turns on. The flooding that this herb needs to survive, the exact condition it evolved for over thousands of years, is the same flooding that destroys almost every other cultivated herb field on Earth. For a commercial grower, someone raising basil, cilantro, or thyme for market, standing water isn't a nutrient. It's a death sentence. Roots drown, pathogens spread, soil turns toxic within hours, not days. One plant's paradise, another farm's ruin. Same water, same chemistry, opposite outcomes, depending entirely on what's rooted in the ground when the flood arrives. That contradiction is exactly what hit a family herb farm in Colorado in September 2013. Boulder County, Colorado, September 2013. Days of relentless rain push creeks over their banks, turning greenhouses and herb rows into a single brown lake. The Fresh Herb Company, an organic family operation, sits directly in the water's path. The Andersons built this farm on culinary herbs, hanging baskets, and greenhouse-cut flowers, a business measured in fragrance and color. In one night, floodwater erases the distinction between crop and contamination. Everything green is now also everything uncertain. This is where the story stops being about botany and starts being about bureaucracy. Somewhere in a federal office, rules already exist for exactly this moment. Rules written long before this flood, waiting to decide the fate of this soil. The FDA's guidance is blunt. Wait at least 30 to 60 days before replanting any vegetable in a flooded field. If heavy metals or heavy contamination are suspected, that window stretches to 60 days minimum. The land goes quiet, on paper, before it goes quiet in reality. Even produce that never touched the floodwater directly isn't automatically safe. Extension services require a minimum 72-hour wait, thorough washing, and full cooking, never eaten raw, for anything merely splashed or near the edge of the water. For anything directly touched by floodwater, the rule is total discard. Leafy greens, tomatoes, corn, peanuts, sweet potatoes, watermelon, winter squash. It doesn't matter what's above ground and what's buried below. The floodwater doesn't discriminate, so the discard order doesn't either. That last detail unsettles even seasoned farmers. Peanuts and sweet potatoes grow underground, sealed away from open air. Watermelon and squash wear thick, hard rinds. None of it matters. Floodwater doesn't stay on the surface. It moves through soil, and soil moves into everything rooted in it. Why such extreme caution over a puddle that will eventually dry up? Because floodwater is rarely just water. It carries petroleum runoff from roads and driveways, sewage pathogens from overwhelmed treatment systems, and residues no eye can detect in a field that looks, within days, deceptively normal again. There is a third danger, less publicized than bacteria or oil: toxic mold. Waterlogged produce and soaked plant matter become ideal breeding ground, and mold toxins don't wash off with a garden hose. They are the quiet third member of floodwaters' contamination triangle. For the Andersons, this meant more than lost inventory. It meant a farm frozen mid-season, unable to legally sell what survived, watching a 60-day countdown while bills and customers didn't wait for regulatory clocks to finish ticking. And yet the story doesn't end in the mud. Insurance alone couldn't save Fresh Herb. What saved it was people. Volunteers arrived with shovels and hoses, mucking out silt, hauling debris, doing by hand what no regulation could speed up. By the following July, less than a year later, there was grass again in the yard, herbs again in the greenhouse, flowers again in bloom. Recovery didn't erase the flood. It simply outlasted the waiting period the paperwork demanded. Recovery didn't come from an insurance check. It came from neighbors with shovels. Volunteers mucked out silt, hauled ruined soil, and rebuilt beds by hand. Boulder County showing up for one family's greenhouse, one wheelbarrow at a time. By the following July, the transformation was complete. Grass filled the yard. Herbs crowded the greenhouse benches again. Flowers bloomed in the field rows. 10 months after the water receded, the farm looked, improbably, alive. The mandatory 60-day wait, the bleach dilutions, the discarded root crops, none of it vanished from memory. Recovery didn't erase the flood. It simply outlasted the waiting period the paperwork demanded. Half a world away, a different flooded field never needed rescuing. It needed exactly what nearly destroyed the Andersons' farm: standing water, warm and shallow, over soft mud. That's rice paddy herb, noom in Vietnamese, maom in Khmer. It doesn't tolerate flooding. It requires it. The same inundation that ruins a Colorado herb farm is this plant's native habitat. In the 1970s, Vietnamese refugees carried that plant's seeds and cuttings across an ocean, resettling it in gardens from California to Texas. A herb built for flooded paddies took root far from any paddy at all. Today, it's a staple in Vietnamese American and Cambodian American kitchens, sliced into sour soups. Can chua, floated in broth. A plant that only makes sense underwater became a taste of home for a diaspora. Ecologists gave this paradox a name long before any single flood made headlines. Wet herb field is a formally recognized vegetation class, herbaceous plant communities growing in permanently saturated ground. In New South Wales and New Zealand, it's not just a botanical label, it's law, a legally defined habitat category, mapped, protected, and regulated like any other piece of governed land. The paradox even leaked into a video game. In Black Desert Online, players farm a terrain called Precious Herb Field. Its wild herbs rendered fresher, healthier, more abundant than anywhere else on the map. And where do those pixelated herbs cluster thickest? Near the water's edge. No developer studied flood ecology to design it. The game just guessed right, and accidentally proved the botany true. A greenhouse in Colorado, a paddy in the Mekong Delta, a conservation map in New Zealand, a server farm running a fantasy game. 4 unrelated places, one shared fact. Water decides what a herb field becomes. It can drown a family's income in 48 hours. It can also be the only reason a leaf worth eating exists at all. For a herb field, water is never just weather. It's verdict and seed in the same breath. Ending and beginning, sharing one cause, one field, one flood. That's the story water keeps writing, quietly, in mud. If this kind of hidden history is worth your time, Subscribe for the next one.